the ouch is temporary, but the growth can be permanent. Feedback is data, not identity. So do not let criticism become the story you tell yourself. Clear the fog, let the right feedback become your fuel, then keep moving forward and write your next chapter.
Hello, I'm your host, Sam East, and welcome to Global Voices in Engineering. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you might notice we have a new name. Diverse is now Global Voices in Engineering. But don't worry, it's the same award-winning SWE podcast that you know and love. We just updated the show's name to capture what SWE and the podcast are all about, bringing together engineering stories from around the world because every engineer has a story. Today, we're talking about how to turn tough feedback into fuel. We all get feedback at work, but hearing it, reacting to it, deciding if it truly applies, and using it to grow are all very different things. Safiyya C. Kassim, a senior specialist in business agility at MSD Czech Republic, is joining us to discuss how to navigate those feedback conversations, manage the emotions that come with them, and sort out the helpful from the not so helpful feedback. Safiyya, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And firstly, Sam, I'd like to really thank you for having me. It truly is an honor to be here. I will not speak about the nervousness, but it's awesome to be here. And yeah, thank you.
That's all totally normal and a big part of it. We love to have an easy conversation between us. And I think that's what we're going to have today. So, Safiyya, we like to start at the beginning. We love to hear the origin story of what initially drew you into STEM. So please introduce yourself and take us through what first sparked that interest in engineering or STEM more broadly.
Absolutely. So as you've already introduced me, my name is Safiyya C. Kassim. The C stands for Cavatina. I am a senior specialist in business agility right here in MSD in the Czech Republic. So alongside my role, I am transitioning into solution architecture / technical architecture role. That was really birthed out of curiosity and more than 8 years worth of project management. So I kind of need to get my hands dirty now. And yeah, I want to focus particularly on agentic AI. So a bit about what brought me, or what rather sparked the interest for me in STEM, is that I really find joy in helping organizations and people all together solve different complex problems through technology. And my journey into STEM was definitely nothing linear. I grew up in Zimbabwe, which is in the southern part of Africa. And from a young age, I was really fascinated by solving problems. This did not necessarily mean I was that child sitting in the corner taking apart radios or building gadgets. But I was always asking questions like why and how can something be done better and why is it being done this way and not another. So I have always been drawn to systems, whether they are technical, organizational, or simply the way people work together. It's really interested me. But interestingly, my first degree when I came to the Czech Republic was not in IT. It was in agriculture. It did, however, have a strong economics and statistical background. And I recall so vividly, my mom was telling me at the time that you should be in IT. That's where you are supposed to be. What the heck are you doing in agriculture? So, yeah, of course, I did not listen because I thought that agriculture was the future, especially coming from a country like Zimbabwe. Agriculture is the backbone for our economy. So we're really big on agriculture and mining, and I always believe that these two industries can definitely help to develop the country. So in as much as I know I may not be able to make a huge contribution. I always thought that no matter how small it is, I could still try to change a few people's lives given the knowledge I was acquiring. So, yeah, after a 2-year break, I went back to university and I pursued a master's in informatics while I was working full time right here at MSD. And I actually just graduated in June on the 15th.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And the interesting thing is that I did not come from a traditional IT or engineering background. And I remember really thanking God because one of the entrance examinations was on engineering and the other one was technical math. And it so happened that the time I applied, the dean decided to waiver it for some awesome reason. So I did not have to go through that. And yeah, many people around me during that time had been programming for years. Some of them were like really young. They were 19, in their early 20s. And I was there learning an entirely new language, which was technology. So to sum that up, there were definitely moments where I questioned whether I belonged there. And over time, however, I learned that engineering is not about what you already know or about knowing everything. It's really about, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to adapt? And how can you solve problems that matter?
Well, speaking of, that's a perfect segue, the human problem of it all, because today's theme is getting curious about how to handle tough feedback and then even how to turn that tough feedback into fuel. Can you take us back to a moment in your career when, you may have received criticism, it was difficult to hear? What happened there and how did you react at the time?
I would probably say that throughout this journey of life I've been on, not many years though, I've kind of learned that not all feedback is created equal because you do have different types of feedback, Sam. Some feedback builds you, some comes to break you, some comes to test you. And if you're not careful and if you allow the wrong feedback to have an effect on you, it defines you. So something that comes to mind is that really early on in life, I used to internalize deeply negative messages from some people around me. And sad part is one or two of those people were family members, unfortunately. And a lot of people often compared me to my peers and they told me what a failure I would be and that I would eventually amount to nothing. So over time, I started believing those voices and that kind of contributed to me losing confidence in myself. And eventually it spiraled into clinical depression. Thankfully, I got out of that. But if I look back, I guess I realized that the greatest damage is not only what was said, it's the fact that I believed it. So I think that is something that came to me as a revelation. And at the time, I was not able to separate the destructive criticism from the constructive feedback. And definitely recovery was not instant. It took a lot of time. It took faith in God. It took support from my family and friends and people who reminded me a lot of the time that criticism may inform your growth, but it should never define your identity.
So that's a relatable experience for a lot of people, I'm sure, who are listening to this right now. But you mentioned that sort of discernment of knowing when to take the feedback and then when to kind of put it aside, put it in a box, perhaps. What is the framework that you've developed to help people move from reaction to action when they get negative feedback? What is the process there?
Before I go to the process, I'll probably just point out something else that just came to mind, Sam, because I do have a process. I would probably title it From Fog to Fuel. I love acronyms, by the way. So I have two acronyms that I will take the listeners through. But before that, feedback is data. It's not identity. You have to take a step back and be reminded that a lot of feedback could contain information about specific behavior. It could be a decision. It could be a result of a particular moment, but it's not the verdict on your worth.
So, with that feedback being data, then someone's hearing it, maybe it's not exactly what they envisioned or would have liked to hear. What's the process then turning reaction to action when they do get that negative feedback?
The process for me that I have learned over time is that I think about difficult feedback through two simple ideas or acronyms, as I mentioned. So the first one is fog and the next one is fuel. So when difficult feedback lands, normally a person's first reaction is often physical or emotional. Our brains can interpret criticism as a threat. That's why you find emotion may arrive before logic sets in. It really doesn't mean we are difficult or weak in any way. It just confirms that we are human. So the fog part helps to slow you down. It regulates your response and you can understand what has happened before you decide what to do next. So I will take us through the fog acronym, and then we will go on to turning fog into fuel. So, of course, the F in fog represents feel. So you have to first acknowledge the emotion. That is really important. You should allow yourself to feel the disappointment, feel the frustration, or even the embarrassment. You don't need to deny it or make important decisions while the emotion is still in control, because definitely and often at time emotions do take control of our cognitive abilities. And in the moment, you can just breathe, pause, count 5 seconds, and simply say to whoever is delivering the feedback to you, thank you for the feedback, even if you feel a lump in your throat. One last thing, if the feedback comes in the form of writing, it's really not urgent. You can give yourself time to think before replying. O is observe. So the next thing, when you observe, you have to take a step back and you become curious. So you need to really ask, what was actually said? Was it factual? Was it just someone's opinion? Was it evidence-based, or was there some form of pattern that existed in that feedback? So what I normally do is that I also look for the truth nugget. It's normally a small piece of information that may be hidden inside poor delivery or in bad timing or just unnecessary noise. So one question I ask myself when I'm observing is that what part of this might be true? And what example would help me to understand it? This has been really helpful. And of course, the G is for gain perspective. So you first feel, then you observe, then you gain perspective. Through the process of gaining perspective, you have to ask who gave the feedback. That's also important. And whether that person genuinely wants you to succeed, because the sad thing in this world we are living in is some people have really bad intentions. They have ill motives. So you have to consider whether the message is specific. Is it actionable? Is it aligned with patterns identified by people around you whom you trust? It could be in your social circle, it could be your work colleagues, or just a trusted mentor or someone else. And you should also see, as you're gaining perspective, does it reflect someone's assumptions or are there limitations towards what feedback was delivered?
So, feel, observe, gain perspective. That's the FOG acronym. How do we then, once we've gone through that process, go from fog to fuel?
Oh, awesome question. So once the fog clears, you then have to decide whether the feedback deserves to become fuel or not. So as you mentioned towards the beginning, sometimes you just have to push certain feedback aside. So what I usually do is that I choose to let the right feedback create energy for growth rather than allowing criticism to become a reason to stop. Because a lot of the time, if you receive negative feedback, the first response is just to stop and quit. So the F in fuel for me, and I hope that it would help somebody listening, is to find the lesson. There is always a lesson in feedback. So when you are finding the lesson, even through painful feedback, it always contains useful information. So you have to find the part that can help you to learn without accepting a judgment about your worth. That is the first important point. Find the lesson in the feedback. And once you've found the lesson, the U stands for understand what needs to change. This is really important as well, because not everything needs to change. You should try to focus on what aligns with your personal values, with your goals, with your responsibilities, and most of all, with your development, be it personal, be it career development, you name it. You have to see, does this align with my values, my goals, my responsibilities, and my development? Hopefully, I'm not sprinting through this, but the E is for execute intentionally. So the next thing is that we need to always keep in mind that growth happens through action. You have to be able to translate the insight into a deliberate change in practices or even just preparation. Because if it is appropriate, you can close the loop with the person who gave you the feedback and explain what you are doing differently. So E is for execute intentionally. And finally, the L is you have to lead differently. The deeper outcome of growth is actually becoming someone who can help others develop without diminishing them. Because I'm probably certain a lot of people know the saying, hurt people hurt people. And sometimes you get negative feedback and you're hurt and you end up diminishing or hurting other people. And that's not the ideal scenario. So the greatest evidence of change is not just merely hearing that you've changed, but recognizing that you now lead yourself and others and you can support others differently.
That's a very helpful framework for those who perhaps are taking notes right now. Fog, feel, observe, gain perspective, turn that into fuel, decide if you're turning it into fuel, which is find the lesson, understand what needs to change, execute intentionally, and lead differently.
Absolutely. And just to sum that up, I'll leave the listeners with a quote I love that I made up during this negative feedback acceptance journey. I'll put it like that. So fog helps me gain clarity. Fuel helps me move forward. Another piece of negative feedback which comes to mind is when one of my mentors here at MSD reached out to me after an all hands meeting. And it was kind of one of the funniest and most valuable pieces of feedback I had ever received. So it came after delivering a presentation during an all hands meeting. He reached out to me and said, Safiyya, you are such a vibrant person. You bring so much light into the room, but when you facilitate or present, it's like you're delivering a graveyard speech.
Oh,
When he said that to me, I did not know how to react. My jaw dropped to the floor and I was just in shock. And I was there thinking, how can somebody be so blunt? So yeah, my first reaction was that I laughed and then I thought, ouch. But to some extent, I guess he was right because when I watched the playback, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of greeted people with a bubbly tone to my voice and then I just calmed down. And from my perspective, from my point of view, I was thinking, okay, because the whole management team is on the call, I should just calm it down and have a professional tone. And I did not realize that it sounded like that. But what I was thankful for is that that very week, I joined Toastmasters.
Ah,
Yeah, I was like, oh no, I need to learn how to have better speaking skills. And yeah, so long story short is during my Toastmaster journey, I kind of excelled and being competitive. I was able to win an area competition for, I think it was international speech contest. And then I went on to win the table topics contest and the evaluation. And because I did not progress to the next level, I quit. But yeah, not advice for the listeners, but I just thought that feedback was blunt at first, but it pushed me to become better. And I would definitely say being a part of Toastmasters has helped build my confidence. It's helped me be more eloquent in my speech. I know I'm not yet 100% there, but I love the journey and I like where I'm going. So yeah, just another example to leave with you.
yeah. I mean, it's a good one too because he led with a compliment. He noticed something about you that was positive, impactful, and then he added the constructive criticism at the end. So you were able to parse for yourself that, okay, this could be useful information for me.
Absolutely.
So when you've put that system in place, the fog into fuel, what then happens when there's been a piece of feedback that you've decided you're not going to take it? How did you decide it wasn't the right feedback for you?
Yeah, that's a good one because, as we've already ascertained, not all feedback needs to be taken into account. I'll take us a few steps back. Like later in my career, I did receive some feedback that completely changed how I think, for example. Like I was trying to prove my value to so many people around me by just saying yes to every opportunity, every project, every responsibility. And my intention, though good, it was not contributing to my growth. And thankfully, my partner, whom I trust and adore so much, helped me to see that doing more doesn't necessarily mean that I'm creating impact. So that feedback was definitely uncomfortable because it challenged the way I thought, and it challenged the fact that I thought taking on a lot of stuff was strength. So going back to your question, when I started my master's in informatics, let's hop over there. I did not have an IT background, and someone from the study department during, I think it was the very day I went for registration. So he told me point blank that I do not have an IT background and I did not deserve to be there. And he was kind of mean because he says that if he had it his way, he would not have allowed he would not have made the same decision the dean did to waiver the entrance exams. And he was like, and I quote, "I will give you 2 weeks to quit." And that
Wow.
was brutal.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That was brutal. And I remember just standing there and I had this smug smile on my face. I do not know how I surmounted the courage to put it there because it landed really bad. And if I had accepted his statement as a conclusion or as truth, I probably would have quit. But instead, I chose to interpret the situation differently. I thought, okay, maybe I don't have an IT background, but I know I can build it. And I'm a person who loves challenges. And I took it as a direct challenge. I decided to ignore the fact that I had gaps in my technological knowledge. So I worked through those gaps, one concept at a time, one coding language at a time, and one course at a time. And though every assignment, every exam, and every late night became so much harder, it was a stepping stone. And it helped me to believe that I was proving to myself that I belonged there. And 2 years later, thankfully, I graduated with honors.
Of course you did. You show them.
Yeah, so yeah, that's how I was able to push that aside and kind of use it as a stepping stone.
It was your fuel. It was your fuel in the end.
Absolutely.
Well, like you decided in that moment, even though it was difficult, not all feedback, unfortunately, comes from a helpful place. Many women engineers might get feedback like, oh, you're too direct, you're not likable enough, you're too much of a certain thing, while at the same time also trying to prove their technical abilities. So, how can women in these male dominated fields separate the constructive feedback from feedback that is rooted in bias? This is a tough one.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. And you kind of see that every day, especially women in engineering. I have lived through that. Before I answer the question, I have an immediate flashback. I remember when I started my Scrum Master journey. I was in a multinational corporation, and I recall being the only female in the room. And often a time I would have male voices talking over me. When I tried to speak up, they would kind of ignore me and brush me aside until one day, and mind you, that was after some months of allowing them to do so. I just stood up in the meeting and I kind of spoke like above all the commotion, and the room was silent. That's when I realized that for women in engineering, no matter how difficult it is, sometimes you need to be super bold and step up even when it appears to be odd, or if you'll be judged or whatever the case, we need to stand up as women. I have experienced moments where I wondered whether feedback was really about my work or whether it reflected assumptions of who I was, where I came from. So at the time, I did learn not to make that judgment too quickly. And I'm still learning it to this day because you never stop learning. If you stop learning, then I do not know what you're doing. So what I do is normally ask whether the feedback is specific, is it actionable, is it supported by evidence, is it consistent with feedback from those I trust? As I mentioned previously, if the answer is yes, then I lean in and I learn. But if I see that it's personal or rooted in any form of stereotype, I acknowledge it and I don't allow it to become my identity. I use what I call the sieve method. Because, if you pour something through a sieve, you get to hold on to what is important and what is not runs through. So that's what I do. So I've also learned that through that all, not every piece of feedback deserves the same response. For example, some feedback is definitely high in truth and impact, so it deserves immediate action. And then you find some just needs clarification or reflection and often realignment because there may be a perception gap. So definitely there's always something valid, but not a current priority. So it can just be noted and you take care of it later on. And finally, some feedback is simply just noise. You can discard it politely whilst holding on to the important things And what you need to always remember, Ed, is that decisions should be made more consciously rather than defensively.
Safiyya, we've learned so much today about how to navigate handling feedback, what to take in, what to sort of put in a box, as we've referred to here. What do you hope that our listeners really absorb, really remember, especially when they're getting a piece of feedback that may sting? What do you hope they take with them from our conversation today?
I hope that they will be able to know what feedback to hold on to, what feedback is there to grow them, and what feedback they can simply discard. Because a lot of feedback challenges behavior, it challenges approaches, and sometimes it's just destructive criticism. So you really need to know what to hold on to and what to let go of. So, what I would tell our listeners is that every one of us will definitely receive feedback that hurts at some point in time. You are definitely going to receive negative feedback. Some of it will be true, some of it will not. But the real skill is not avoiding this criticism. It's about learning to distinguish between the feedback that can shape your future and the opinions that should remain in the past. So, as advice, listen carefully, reflect honestly, and learn continuously. But never let anyone else's opinion become the ceiling of your potential. I'll leave you with something that I wrote down, and it goes something like: the ouch is temporary, but the growth can be permanent. Feedback is data, not identity. So do not let criticism become the story you tell yourself. Clear the fog, let the right feedback become your fuel, then keep moving forward and write your next chapter.
Wow, Safiyya, you're like a poet.
I love poetry, by the way.
I can see that.
Cat's out the bag.
Yeah. A woman in STEM and a poet. She could do it all. Safiyya, this has been a very informative, useful, helpful piece of feedback for everyone. So I thank you so much for your curiosity and your expertise today. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's been a total pleasure. Thank you for having me. And hopefully it won't be the last time. Thanks a lot, Sam.
Thank you, Safiyya. I'm Sam East, and from all of us at SWE, thank you for listening.